Is it worth a fight? And how do we make that fight as easy as possible? You can decide where you live. These both help us see better and do things better, but in entirely different ways. Small gears is tasks and processes and systems and checklists. You can only manage what you can control, and you can't control time. It just ticks away. There are some things that are holding you back. What are you trying to achieve? What are your goals? What's your vision? What's your mission? Is this worth a fight? Let's make a start and course correct along the way. So Tom Peters once said, leaders don't create followers, they create more leaders. Yet for many leaders, truly grasping and applying this idea can be a challenge. Do you find yourself struggling with this concept? I wonder, many do. Here's a question to help you answer that question. Are you lighting fires under your team, or are you lighting fires within your team? So are you lighting fires under, or are you lighting fires within? There's a significant difference between the two. One of them is what managers typically do, and the other is what leaders typically do. Can you guess which is which? I'm sure you can. If you struggle to identify where you fall on the spectrum between management and leadership right now, and many of us do, have a think about these comparisons as well. Managers give their people something to do, and leaders give their people something to believe in. Managers tell people how to act, and leaders help people learn how to think. Management is the use of directed authority, and leadership is kind of the process of guided discovery. Management is narrow focus, and leadership is broad focus. Management is not leadership, and leadership is not management, and it's about time that we all learn the difference between the two, and then start being intentional and authentic about both of them. Then that's exactly why we put this episode together for you, to help you understand exactly why we need to finally figure out how to stop managing and start leading. Welcome to Stop Managing and Start Leading, the podcast for leaders who need to stop managing and for managers who want to start leading. I'm your host, Antonio Garrido, the founder and president of My Daily Leadership. I'm a serial entrepreneur, business founder and leader, just like you. I'm a 3-time author, and I have led businesses from ground level startups all the way to Fortune 60s with billions in revenue and thousands of employees. What if I told you that the secret to exceptional leadership is much easier and much closer than you think? Every leader and every manager has the potential to become exceptional, the kind of leader that they, their people, and their business truly deserve. And you're no exception. You just simply need to discover the mindsets, the tools, the competencies, the habits, the beliefs to unlock that potential. And that's where we come in. So before we get into today's episode, allow me to introduce you to our very good friend, the subscribe button. So be a poppet and subscribe to the My Daily Leadership YouTube channel today for actionable insights and practical tools in our podcast episodes that drop every week. And if you're listening on a podcast platform, be sure to become very well acquainted with our other dear friend, the follow button. Both will help you to level up your leadership, so do it now. A group CEO of mine once gathered the whole exec team into the boardroom and, quite frankly, admonished us for all spending way too much time managing our teams or functions or divisions and not enough time leading them. Sure, he said, when leaders manage, the wheels turn. But when leaders lead, the journey begins. Ugh, nice. So he was such an inspirational guy. And our journey began, I think, that day in a really big way. We turned the business around. We won national awards, big stuff, right? We were in the papers and everything, and stuff that I'm still very proud of to this very day. Now your journey could be just the beginning. Today too. So let's dive into it together. If you're joining us on YouTube today, you'll see how we always introduce you to a critical leadership model by drawing it out real time. Why? Well, because we're visual learners here at My Daily Leadership, or VLs. Now, if you're listening on a podcast platform because you're much more of an auditory learner, what we lovingly call our ALs, that's perfectly okay too. But if you want to see the content that we're about to talk through drawn out in real time by my very fair hand, switch over to YouTube now or later. That's fine too. Now, the models we draw in this episode and all future episodes too will also be available to download online at www.mydailyleadership.com/podcast. So here we go then. So if you were with us last time, you will have seen this model. And this model, there's a lot to go into, so we're not going to go into it today, but I want to talk about this point here. I mentioned that in this episode today, we were going to talk about this point here, which is the moment of truth line, the MOT line, right? When we start going from doing things to doing more important things, right? From thinking to doing. So this is the point I want to talk about, which is the inflection point between leading and managing. So let's dive into that today. If you want to see more about this model, go on to our last episode. Okay, so here we go. We always start with a question, and here's today's question. So today's question, this going from managing to leading, is it worth the fight? Is it, so this is today's question. This is what we're going to answer today. Is it worth the fight? You can substitute that for, is it worth the effort? Is it worth the pain? Is it worth the anguish and the change and the frustration and all of those good things? Is it worth the fight? Because if it's not worth the fight, then we're not going to do it. We will continue to do what we've always done. So let's think about, is it worth the fight? And how do we make that fight as easy as possible? Okay, so let's come back to that moment of truth, that first inflection point where we decide, you know what? We're not going to think about it anymore. We're not going to talk about it anymore. We're not going to read about it anymore. We're not going to watch YouTube videos or any other videos about it anymore. We're not going to go to a seminar. We're actually going to make a change, that first inflection point. So let's look at inflection point 1. For those auditory listeners, our ALs, I'm just going to quickly draw a very quick table. So inflection points. Inflection point 1, although I guess you could argue it's also the same for inflection point 2, which is our MOT, our moment of truth line. So moment of truth, which we call our MOT line or MOT point. Okay, so let's imagine that this line down here, this vertical line down here, this is our MOT line. Where things on the left are managing and things on the right are leading. So let's put those in here. So managing. There comes our inflection point, a moment of truth, and we start leading, or at least getting that balance better between leading and managing. Okay. Well, we know what managing looks like. So let's just do a tiny list of managing. And you know, if you ever want to while away a few terrific hours, you can go along to any Barnes and Noble or any bookstore, right? And you can go to the business section and then have a look. There's miles upon miles upon miles of management books and leadership books. And what do they really, really all talk about? Well, let's have a look at what management is. Let's distill it right down to its component parts, right? What is management all about? Well, we call management the use of directed authority, and we also refer to it as kind of a problem solving and resource allocation and the usual stuff, but let's just put a few names on there, right? So managing is about scheduling. That's scheduling time, people, effort, energy, resources. So it's about resource scheduling. Then it's about monitoring, right? Kind of keeping score. How's everybody doing, right? It's about controlling. It's about, obviously you need to do some administration and all of that good stuff that keeps the gears of the business moving. And whilst we're talking about gears, let's actually call it small gears. Management is about smaller gears, small gears. Leading has got something more to do with vision. It's got something more about inspiring. It's got something to do with empowering and motivating, perhaps. Now, none of these things are exclusively one thing or another, but it's where does the majority, where does the kind of like the 90-10 or maybe even the 80-20 live, right? So of course you do some motivating in management, right? But leading is more about motivating. And let's just kind of, for the purposes of continuing on the analogy, let's think about large gears. So leading is about those kind of things. Okay, terrific. Now, for any cyclist out there, I guess it could be any people that know anything about engines and all of that kind of stuff. The small gears are normally, you go slowly. Where do you use small gears? Well, going uphill. Okay, cool. So we'll talk about gears a little bit later on. We'll talk about small gears and large gears and some other things. So bear that in mind, we'll come back to it. The summary of all of that, I guess, is delegating actions. So delegating actions is try and do this, try not to do that, tell him this, tell him that, ask him about this, right? And even though it's done with beautiful tonality and a warm pair of slippers and a nice warm cup of cocoa, it's still what we call the use of directed authority. So it's directed authority. Okay, cool. And then, all right, well, what's leading about then? Well, this is more about delegating results. So delegating results for our auditory listeners, right, is on the leading side, right? Delegating results. Management is about delegating actions, do this, do that, tell him this, tell him that, here's your goal, KPIs, here's how we're going to measure it, all of that good stuff. Management and leading is more about delegating results. Here's what we're trying to achieve, let's figure it out. And this is what we call the use of directed influence. So managing is the use of directed authority and leading is the use of directed influence. Cool. So what else comes into this management piece? Well, as I said earlier, it's resource allocation. And at its heart, it's also conflict resolution. So if you're wondering what management is all about, when you go to your Barnes & Noble and you look at all of those books, management is about resource allocation, it's about conflict resolution at its heart. Now, of course, there's much more into it than that, but that's what we call it, and that's how we're going to refer to it as time goes on, as you join more and more of these sessions. Another way to think about it, which people like, is managing is about microscopes. Microscope. And leading is about telescope. Bear with me for 1 second. I think I have both of these here somewhere. Microscope. This is to remind us what management is all about. Very close focus, right? So microscopes, we know what microscopes are. That's what management looks like. And then I think over here, we have our telescopes, right? Which is much more wide focus. So these both help us see better and do things better, but in entirely different ways. So microscope is management and telescope is leadership. Okay, cool. Another way to think about it, obviously, managing is close focus. I hope you can see this in the camera. That's all about close focus, and telescope is all about far focus. Okay, cool. Let's just quickly also over here just remind ourselves of something that we talked about in our last episode. So let me just quickly draw this model for you. It's we talked about it last time, but it's just a different way of thinking about it. So we have management here, This is management along here, and it's leadership along the bottom. I'm not sure, somebody will know, but what's this kind of model called? Every model has a name. I don't know what this one's called, but if anybody knows, please let me know, right? But so what we have is management and leadership. So there are those people who get it spot on, exactly what we're looking for, which is managing 30% of the time and leading 70% of the time. That's how we want, if we look here, this is our preferred split, right? Preferred split, right? So we're managing 70, we're leading 30. That helps us at that inflection point, that moment of truth. Point one, right? There are times, in exceptional times of high stress or high crisis, right? Where we'll give you a hall pass. Every now and again, you need to manage 70, lead 30, right? And these are exceptional times, right? Exceptional splits. But we don't want this all the time. We just want this some of the time. And as long as we are mindful and intentional about it, okay, we let it slide. But if you find yourself managing 70 and leading 30 forever and a day, we won't get to that point where we stop working in the business and start working on the business. I had a complete brain fart there for a second. So let's remember, okay? Managing is microscope, leading is telescope. If you want to continue that analogy just one more level, another way that we talk about it is managing is maps and leading is compasses. So think about that for a few minutes. That'll all kind of hopefully make sense. All right, so let's look at some more models just for a second, right? So we also mentioned very briefly last time, and we're going to talk about it in great detail in our next episode. We talked about this principle of being people focused versus being task focused and being reactive or proactive. And at any point in the day, right, as we're going through our day, we can figure out, we can take a second, we can take a breath, and we can say, hold on for a second, what am I doing right now, right? So let's be very intentional about it. Am I being people focused? Am I being task focused? Am I being reactive? Am I being proactive? When we start to do that, when we start to evaluate our own performance, because at MDL, My Daily Leadership, we say that wisdom comes from evaluated experience, not just time served. We'll talk about that more in episodes to come. But here's the important thing. If you remember one thing from today's episode, it's this. You can decide where you live. You can decide where you live. This is an important, critical principle to accept. You may say, but hold on, I can't decide where I live because I've got to do this, I've got to do that, I've got all of these things on my to-do list. I get it, but they're all a decision, right? You have decided to do those things because deciding to do something else is uncomfortable. We'll have a look in a second. What things are holding you back, right? So we'll do that in a second. But let's come back to this small gears, large gears, just for a second so we get that firmly in our head. So we know that tasks and processes, we know systems and checklists. By the way, I said it last time and I'll say it again, and I'll probably say it many more times. I do apologize for my scruffy writing, but I am also very visual. And I really, writing things down, modeling things out helps me think. And I hope you do lots of that too. Most leaders take the time to sit down with a piece of white paper and a pen and figure out what's going on, right? They start actually drawing things out. Tony Buzan's mind maps are terrific for that, and all of the models that we go through. So if you like the models that we go through in all of our episodes, please go onto our website, download them. They're terrific. Okay, so small gears is tasks and processes and systems and checklists. In other words, microscopes and maps. Okay, so that's small gears, microscopes and maps. And I think we've got an episode coming up in about 4 episodes time, which is microscopes and maps, or telescopes and compasses. But anyway, so then we have larger gears are vision and people and insight. At My Daily Leadership, we're big proponents of insight and future proofing. That's our job. That's a leader's job. A leader's job is to future proof their organization. So it's insight and future proofing. So that's large gears. That's what large gears looks like. That's large gears. And telescopes and compasses. Okay, good. And as we're going along, you're hopefully picking up some of our vernacular, right? The kind of the way that we talk about things. But let's just hit pause for a moment before we carry on with this model right here. If this episode is striking a chord with you and you're ready to elevate your leadership game, you're in for a treat. We wrote a book all about leadership. It's called, unsurprisingly, My Daily Leadership. Can you see that? I hope there's not too much glare. It's called My Daily Leadership, a roadmap, nice, a powerful roadmap for leadership success. So head over to www.mydailyleadership.com/book or click the link in the description to get your hands on a copy. This book has been written to strip away all of the complexities often found in leadership development literature, and it presents a clear, actionable, powerful roadmap for leadership success, hence the name, unsurprisingly. And it was just recently included in the Top 20 Business Minds Book Award for 2024. How proud are we of that? So, if you want to get better at leading, then make a decision to get better at leading today, I hope. Indecision has no place in leadership. Leadership means leading, deciding and leading. And as we always say at My Daily Leadership, to begin. So begin today. Buy the book. And remember, we're always looking for your contribution. Please share your thoughts, questions, comments, and aha moments in the comments section below. All right, ready to dive back in? Let's get back to the models. So let's imagine, so this is going to be a tricky model for our auditory learners. This is going to be tricky for me to describe, but if you could imagine, okay, we have a line running down the middle of the page, and we're going to imagine that right in the middle of this is you right now. So this is you right now. And there's some stuff that's kind of pulling you, holding you back. So let's draw a big arrow over here pointing over to the left. So there's some stuff here, and we're going to call that what's holding you back. Okay, so what's holding you? Right? So there's lots of things that's holding you back. So let's just say 1, 2, 3, 4. There are some things that are holding you back. Okay, well, we have to recognize those things that are holding us back, and we talk a lot about them in the book, so get the book and you'll see what the kind of things are holding you back. But then there are some other things, right, that we want to think about more, because those are the things that are going to propel us forward. There are some things that we could do more of that could propel us forward. So there are a few things that we could do less of that are holding us back, these things over here, and we could do more things of the things that are going to propel us forward, and they will continue to propel us forward. If we do more of these things, right, and fewer of these things, the direction is over to the right. In other words, they are propelling us forward. So these are the things that are pulling you. So the stuff that's holding you and the stuff that's pulling you. So what's pulling you? Right? In other words, what are you trying to achieve? What are your goals? What's your vision? What's your mission, right? Those are the kinds of things that are pulling you. Now, one of the things we think about when we're super duper 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 busy is how do we get more things done in less. So many people come to us and say, hey, can you help us out with maybe a time management course and so on? We go, no, because there's no such thing as time management. So if there's any of you out there that have spent money on a time management course, well, I do apologize. Why is there no such thing as time management? Because you can only manage what you can control, and you can't control time. It just ticks away, second after second after second, and you get the same amount of time, the same amount of seconds as JFK, as Gandhi, as Alexander the Great, right? We all get the same amount of time. So there's no such thing as time management. There is such a thing as behavior management, and that's the things that we do in the time that we have. So we have to be very, very, very careful about how we invest our time. Not how we spend our time, how we invest our time. Why? Why invest and not spend? Because for an investment, we're looking for a return that's greater than our, let's say, cost, right? So what we tend to try and be as managers is super duper 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 efficient, right? We try and get things done as quickly as possible, as accurately as possible, so we don't have to go over and redo, right? We spend all of our time being super efficient, managing every single second of the day to the extent that we can. We can't manage them, we just said, but what am I doing in every second of every day? And typically we'll spend a lot of time, many hours, weekends, nights, early mornings, trying to be the most efficient that we can be. There's lots of technology that you probably use to make you super duper efficient. But you know what? If we spent more time being effective, another way of thinking about that is management is about being effective and efficient, and leadership is about being effective. Okay, so the question is, you can decide where you live, and we talked. The question for today is it worth the fight? Well, this is the question. Is this worth the fight? Saying goodbye to this to the extent that we possibly can, and saying yes to this. And it's this decision, because you can decide where you live. So maybe the answer to the question for today is, I want you to think about it this way, because a lot of people think, if I had more people, if I had more time, well, you don't, we all have the same time, more resources, more money. And I'm going to say, look, it's none of those things. It's the decision, it's the comfort zones and all of the stuff that we talked about earlier. But I would also like to think about this, if you could. So a quote, I don't know who to attribute it to, but I think we all know it, where we say, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fact in the dog. What does that mean? It really does mean that you have to be determined, right? To make that change. You have to be determined. If you're not, you're doomed. Okay, so another thing about this back up here. I'll give you another one of our rules. We have lots of MDL rules, Managed Daily Leadership rules. We're actually working on another book all about our rules. That'll be good. Don't strive for perfect. Efficiency. Strive for messy, not lean on messy, messy effectiveness. Which is why last time we said, look, to begin. to start, right? Make an imperfect start and course correct along the way. So don't wait until your plan is absolutely perfect and then we're going to execute, right? We make that decision, that moment of truth. We just make that decision. We're going to start leading, stop managing, decide where we're going to live, watch what we're doing, figure out from our last episode what things we're going to do, what things we're going to delegate. One of the key things that we talk about our leaders about is, listen, leaders should only do the things that nobody else can do. I'll say that one more time. You should be only doing the things that nobody else can do. If other people can do the things that you're doing, then you're not being effective. You're just trying to be super duper efficient. And maybe you think to yourself, well, no one will do it as well as I do. And why is that? Because you're not developing your people, because you're managing them and you're not leading them. Okay, good. A conversation for another day, perhaps. All right, so let's think about one other point. So come back to you right now. Let's think about it this way and ask yourself this question. I'll ask the question, then we'll just unpick it for a second. But the question I'd like you to ask yourself, I've moved the paper around. Sorry about that. For all your visual learners, I've made you feel slightly seasick. Sorry about that. The question is, am I boiling? Am I boiling a frog? So what does that mean? Well, it's rather grisly and gruesome, and I'm sorry about that if there are any frog lovers out there, but I think we all know about what happens. I don't know who first said it, but if you put a frog, again, I apologize, and I'm sorry I've even started down this route, but if you put a frog in cold water and you put it on the heat and you slowly turn up the heat and the water gets warmer and warmer and warmer and warmer, eventually you boil the frog, right? The frog eventually dies by tiny, tiny increments, and it doesn't try and jump out of the water. It just gets so used to the heat and it just eventually dies. And sometimes we look at some of the people that come to us and we just think, man, it's that death by 1,000 cuts, right? It's just every day the heat goes up a little bit, we don't do anything about it. It gets a little bit warmer, we don't do anything about it. It gets a little bit warmer, we don't do anything about it. Until what happens? Well, I was going to say we turn around and we're dead. There's no such thing, but you get the idea, right? So again, it's that decision time, right? It's time to make a decision. To begin, to change, make an imperfect start and course correct along the way. It's what pilots do after all. You know, and I know, if you've ever been on an aeroplane, let's imagine you're going from JFK to London Heathrow. The pilot takes off from JFK. He's logged his plan, right, with the FAA. He knows where he's starting from and he knows where he wants to go. You guys do that all the time. You make a business plan. It's the same as a flight path, right? A flight plan that's registered. Here's my goal. I'm starting off here and I want to get here. Terrific. Do you think that pilot ever takes off, turns on a bearing of, I don't even know what the bearing is, from probably about 20 degrees, I would imagine, perhaps, because you kind of go more north than east. But anyway, and then 7.5 hours later, or 8.5 or 9 hours later, just land. What are the chances that the pilot is going to, that the airplane's going to land on runway 14 of Heathrow? I mean, zero. You probably find yourself in the Irish Sea or in Moscow. Who knows? So what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that we have a plan like a pilot does, and a pilot takes off and knows that he or she has to make 1,000 tiny course corrections along the way. And he's perfectly happy with that. Well, why aren't we the same? We have our plan and we know that we're going to course correct. So let's not wait until it's perfect and only execute when all the conditions are perfect. No, let's make a start and course correct along the way. So next time, we're going to talk about more of that kind of stuff. All right, so let's wrap for today. I know I've taken a lot of your time, so thanks for being so gorgeous. Gorgeous enough to tune into Stop Managing and Start Leading, a My Daily Leadership podcast. Now look, whatever your reason for listening or watching today, I really do hope that this episode has offered you something of value, even if it's just one tool or one tip or one mindset that maybe improves your leadership ability by only 1%. Remember, there's immense power in marginal gains over time. There's also power in community, and we love you all. So please do share your questions, share your insights and topics, suggestions, anything like that in the comments if you're watching on YouTube. And whilst you're down there, give this video a like and subscribe too, why not? Terrific. And for our auditory learners, our ALs, you're only getting half the story, I'm afraid. So I highly recommend heading over to YouTube, to our YouTube channel, where today's episode really comes to life with visual notes, models and drawings, right? That'll also be available if you go to our website. So in the next episode, we are going to explore the journey from competent management to inspirational leadership and trying to figure out and reveal how to achieve transformative growth and strategic success. But if you can't wait until then, and I hope you can't, please head to www.mydailyleadership.com for much, much more. Hey, thanks for tuning in. I'm Antonio Garrido with My Daily Leadership. Thanks for being here, and until next time, by wisdom and effort, ta-ta for now. See you next time.